Pirates I can reject everything 21-40. 021. Luo, if you dare to escape, I will kill you. Do you know who is after me? Luo looked at Chris coldly and said sarcastically, have you heard of Doflamingo, one of the 7 seas under the king? Do you think it will be his opponent? Stop kidding. Hearing what he said, everyone was stunned. They didn't expect that the other party's background was so big. Oh King Chiwahai, what a terrifying existence. Chris's goal is not this. Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth and said lightly, it happened so coincidentally that I met my opponent so quickly. The sweetheart queen shook her head, frowned, and retorted. It can't be his, have you forgotten? In Chris's plan, it was Crocodile who started. With Chris as a person, how can it be possible to change the plan made in advance? Bassos looked at Chris, raised his arms, and laughed. Captain, do you want to change the plan and kill this Doflamingo directly? Then we are Chiwahai, way ha 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 ha. Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, and said very gentlemanly, I heard from the captain that in the Chiwahai, the strongest swordsman is Joe Raquel Mahawk. And this Doflamingo is either second or third in strength. After all, he is a domineering man. Poison Q looked at the two of them with a strange smile. Isn't it interesting that the captain will stop taking action? You have a fight with him first. At this time, Chris put his hands in his trouser pockets, looked at Luo, and said calmly, then make a bet. If I can save you, you will follow me in the future. If you can't, don't tell me. Bebo's eyes lit up, a little excited, and hurriedly urged. Captain, let's promise him, Doflamingo is really too strong. Luo didn't speak, and looked at Chris and the others coldly, weighing the pros and cons. At this moment, an insolent voice came over. Foo 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 foo. Brother Doflaming walked with 8 character steps as always, and said extremely arrogantly, there are so many little ghosts on the island, it's really lively. I haven't killed anyone for a long time, so today I just had a good time. Doflamingo looked at Luo and grinned, my dear Luo, you must be very happy with so many people buried with you, foo 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 foo. The queen sweetheart looked at the flamboyant figure with a curious look on her pretty face. Is this the Chiwahai under the king? It looks so domineering and strong. Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth and said lightly, as expected of a pirate recognized by the world government, he is indeed domineering and defiant. Perona tilted her head with a look of interest on her face, and said something. This person's walking is so interesting. This is the first time this princess has seen such a pace. It's amazing. Bashes shrugged his shoulders and said with emotion, this is the king going down to the Chiwahai, even walking with the demeanor of a big brother. Lafitte turned his cane and smiled slightly, it's very strong, and it is indeed one of the best existences in the Chiwahai under the king. At this moment, Luo nodded and said coldly, okay, I'll bet with you. If you really have that kind of strength, then I'll definitely join. I'm Tilda. Hearing what the captain said, Beppo was very happy and smiled. Chris glanced at Luo and said calmly, I'll tell you something in advance. If you run away secretly while I'm fighting with Doflamingo, caught by me, I will kill you. After speaking, he walked straight forward and stood in front of Doflamingo. Hearing Chris say that, Luo frowned, hesitating in his heart. He originally planned to use Chris to sneak away while the two were fighting. But now that his mind has been guessed through by others, it will be troublesome now. I suggest you don't run away. Baccarat stroked her hair and said with a sweet smile, Chris has always done what he says. If you run away, something will really happen. When the time comes, even if we pled for you, Chris won't listen. The sweetheart queen nodded in agreement. Miss Baccarat is right, you'd better not have that kind of thinking, or it's really dangerous. Betty took a breath and said lightly, you are destined to be our partner since we landed on the island. Poison Q looked at Bassos and Lafitte with a mysterious smile. Aren't you going to help? This is a good opportunity. I usually want to fight with Chiwahai, but I can't find anyone. Bashes glared at him and said angrily, "Don't talk nonsense. The other party is not an ordinary Chihuahua. Do you want us to go up and die, bastard tilde tilde?" Lafitte adjusted his top hat and said politely, "Although I really want to try Doflamingo's strength, but life is important, it's better not to mess around." At this time, a gust of breeze blew, the leaves made rustling sounds, and the flowers and plants shook gently. With his hands still in his trouser pockets, Doflamingo grinned and said, "Little devil, what's your name? I suddenly have a little interest in you. Join my family and you have the opportunity to become a cadre. You must know that the Don Quixote family is the largest family in the world. It is a great honor to be able to enter it." Doflamingo laughed and continued, "How about it, do you really want to join in, foo 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 foo?" Guys, regarding Doflamingo's ranking in Chihuahua, the author believes that he is ranked second. His strength should be a little stronger than Tyrant Bear. After all, he is a domineering man. What do you think about this asterisk? 022, I'm laughing out loud, foo 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 foo. You think too much, Doflamingo. Chris put his arms around him and said calmly, "However, it's true that we will become partners in the future." "Oh." Doflamingo looked curious and grinned. "Little devil, you said you wanted to cooperate with me, so let's hear it." "As a person, I like cooperation the most, foo 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 tilde tilde." Chris said indifferently with an expressionless face, "It won't be long before I become Chihuahua, and then we will form an organization. 7 Wuhai Alliance." Hearing this, Doflamingo couldn't help covering his face and laughed like a madman. "Foo foo 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 foo. Little devil, you said it so well," I laughed out loud. Immediately afterwards, Brother Doflamingo's eyes turned cold, the blue veins on his face burst out, and he said fiercely, "Just rely on you, you want to be Chihuahua, don't laugh at people. Cooperation. You are also worthy of cooperating with me, what a joke." Seeing Doflamingo being so arrogant, Bassos was not happy and shouted loudly, "Captain, this bastard is too arrogant, let's fight. Isn't he dissatisfied? Then convince him." Lafitte turned his cane and said with a slight smile, "After all, they are the powerful Chihuahua. If you want to talk about cooperation and don't show your strength, it will definitely not work." Perona flew around in the air, wrinkling her face, looking very dissatisfied. "What's this called? It looks really annoying." Sweet Queen smiled and gave the answer, "His name is Doflamingo." Baccara looked at everyone, smiled tenderly, and suggested, "This battle is unavoidable, let's all walk away, so as not to be affected. Both are powerful monsters and it's really dangerous to get too close." After Betty finished speaking, she walked directly to the back, away from the battlefield. Beppo looked at Luo and said anxiously, "Captain, what should we do?" "Go back." Luo thought about it carefully, this Chris is very strong, so he still won't sneak away. Soon, the people around, all withdrew to the side, leaving the place to Chris and Doflamingo. It's superfluous to say this now. Chris was as calm as always and said directly, "Let's fight first and speak with strength." Doflamingo grinned, his expression extremely arrogant. "I haven't met such an arrogant kid for a long time. Sure enough, the era of the great pirate has really come, foo 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 foo. Little brat, dance to your heart's content, but don't die too fast." 5-color line. Without any hesitation, Doflamingo swung his right hand and launched a violent attack. Chris stood quietly, without dodging, his face was calm and calm. When the 5 silk threads approached, he slowly raised his hand. Mirror repulsion. In an instant, a transparent mirror appeared diagonally above, blocking Chris from behind. Bang! Before the 5-color line touched the mirror, it was bounced out and danced in the air. Rumbling tilde. Doflamingo threw the silk thread to the ground, and the explosion sounded, and the smoke and dust scattered, leaving deep scars. Seeing that the ground was cut like that, the surrounding people sighed with emotion one by one. As expected of the Chihuahua, a casual blow is so powerful. Betty took a breath, a rare dignified expression on her pretty face. Baccarat folded her crimson hair, smiled and said, "The name of the 7 Marshalseas is not a false name. However, no matter how strong he is no match for Chris. I firmly believe that." The Queen's sweetheart nodded and agreed, "That's right, our captain is the strongest man." Bassos laughed loudly, as expected. As the captain said, "This guy's attacks are all using silk threads or the like." Raffet nodded and said with a slight smile, "After all, it is the fruit of Superman's line, so it must be line to attack." At this time, Doflamingo's 5 fingers were slightly bent, and a few fingers moved around, as if he was dancing. Exclusion. "It looks like you ate the superhuman repulsion fruit." Doflamingo grinned and said mockingly, "Little devil, after eating such a rubbish devil fruit, you are destined not to be strong in this life. If I remember correctly, the last person with the ability to reject the fruit was killed by a bandit. I didn't expect the garbage fruit that disappeared for hundreds of years to appear, and it was eaten by you, kid. I feel so sorry for you, foo 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 tilde tilde." Chris is not surprised that Doflamingo can name his devil fruit. After all, this guy is a Tianlong person, and he is also a big boss in the underground world. He must have seen the devil fruit illustration. "Doflamingo, let me tell you a fact." Chris put his arms around him and said calmly, "Villains often die of talking too much. Little devil, you are really good at preaching." Brother Doflamingo covered his face with a crazy look on his face. "I was so angry that I laughed out loud, foo 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 foo." Bounce. Suddenly, Doflamingo flicked his right index finger, and a thin transparent line quietly emerged from the fingertips, swiftly like lightning, and rushed towards Chris. "Big guys, you won't write too many chapters when you fight Doflamingo. There are at most 2 chapters to come, and it will definitely end. After all, you don't like watching this kind of fight, don't you?" 023. Compress the repulsive force into a fist, repulsive fist. "It's my turn." Chris didn't take the call, and with a swoosh, he disappeared directly in place. People suddenly flashed over Doflamingo. The right fist was armed in an instant, from top to bottom, and slammed down. The speed is fast, the momentum is full. It is very shocking. Amazing speed. Doflamingo didn't have time to dodge, so he quickly raised his hands, folded them together, and armed them for defense. Bang! A loud noise came, the ground sank, and the surrounding dust rose high, covering the 2 of them. "Can't see what's inside at all." Sure enough, he is not a person of the same class, so strong. Bassos shook his head with a look of emotion on his face. Poisonous Q said enviously, "This is the counterbang of the armed color, the power is really powerful." Lafitte adjusted his top hat and said gently, "It's just the beginning, the 2 haven't exerted their strength yet, and the excitement is still to come." "Captain, he is so strong." Babo looked at Luo next to him with a surprised look on his face, and couldn't help but praise him. Luo frowned and said coldly, "The armed color is indeed very strong, but if it is only this level, it is definitely not Doflamingo's opponent." Hearing that someone questioned Chris, Queen Sweetheart was unhappy and immediately refuted. "Chris is not as weak as you think. What Doflamingo? He must be the one who will lose." Betty nodded, exhaled the smoke in his mouth, and agreed, "If you can't even beat Doflamingo, how can you change the world?" Baccarat stroked her crimson hair and smiled gently, "Don't worry, Chris never fights uncertain battles, and he has never disappointed anyone." Ha tilde tilde. At this time, a gust of wind blew, and the smoke and dust dispersed, revealing the scene inside. A large circular pit appeared on the ground, and the surrounding land was cracked, revealing countless cracks that spread in all directions. A simple blow is so terrifying. At this time, Doflamingo stood in the round pit, and Chris was floating in the air, looking down coldly. "Foo foo 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 foo." Doflamingo looked up at Chris, laughed and said, "Yes, the strength is really good, kid. The speed is extremely fast, and the armament is very strong. No wonder you dare to challenge me. But why are you floating in the air? This is definitely not the moon step. Is it the ability of the devil fruit? Doflamingo shook his head again and again, and said in disbelief, impossible. How can such a garbage devil fruit be able to do this? Little devil, how on earth did you do it? Chris put his arms around him, looked down at him, and said something calmly. Beat me and you'll know the answer. Angry. Doflamingo was extremely angry. The veins on his face burst out, and his 5 fingers kept beating. He laughed and said, Little devil, you are very good, you have successfully angered me. I originally wanted you to join the family, but now I've decided, it's better to kill you, foo. With a heavy step, the ground cracked again, and with a bang, the figure flashed into the air. Foot shave. Doflamingo was armed with his right foot, and 8 transparent silk threads emerged from his toes, and kicked Chris's head fiercely. The speed is astonishing, and the air vibrates faintly, as if even the space has been cut. You can see the horror of this kick. Fist. Chris opened his right hand, and white light continued to appear in his palm, and the repulsive force increased sharply. Finally, he clenched his fists violently. A large white fist appeared instantly. At the kick of Doflamingo, he slammed it hard. Bang! With a loud explosion, the picture suddenly freezes. Doflamingo's kick stopped in the air, about a meter away from Chris. Doflamingo's forehead burst with blue veins, and he used all his strength. In any case, this kicking technique cannot fail. But no matter how hard he tried, his dark right foot just couldn't move forward. Always been rejected. Chris looked extremely calm, and spit out 2 words softly. Fly. Boom tilde. The large white fist, like a rocket thruster, suddenly exerted force before Doflamingo could react. With a swoosh, Doflamingo's body kept flying backwards and backwards. He tried to stabilize his body, trying to dodge this repelling force. Helpless, this white fist was compressed too much by Chris, and the repulsive force was so strong that he couldn't get rid of it at all. Rumbling. In the process of flying backwards, Doflamingo kept knocking down the big tree, making a series of explosions. But even if there was a big tree blocking it, Doflamingo couldn't stabilize his body and was still flying backwards. Damn little devil, he has developed the fruit of rejection to such a degree that I can't keep you. Doflamingo finally hit a big tree, and his body was embedded a little before he stopped. At this time, the distance between Chris and Doflamingo was a full 200 meters. A total of 12 trees were broken. It can be seen how strong the repulsive force of this blow is. Seeing such a shocking scene, the people around could not be calm. One by one, I admire the strength of Chris to the extreme. Guys, there are so few evaluation tickets, can you send some evaluation tickets to the author? Thank you for your bow, please send an evaluation ticket 024. The collision of Overlord colors. As expected of the captain, he is really amazing, way ha 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 ha. Bassos raised his arms and laughed. Poison Q was lying on Stallone, smiling mysteriously and said, even one of the best Shichibukai is not the captain's opponent. Hey, Crocodile, then needless to say, we will soon become Shichibukai. Lafitte turned his cane and said something with a slight smile. You underestimate Brother Doflamingo, this guy hasn't started to exert his strength, and the fight will be scary. Beibo Shang's eyes widened, with a look of admiration on his face, and said to Luo, Captain, he is really strong, we are saved. Luo shook his head and said coldly, it's not that easy. Brother Doflamingo can't be defeated so easily. What's the matter with you? How can you be so powerful, and destroy your own momentum? The sweetheart queen glared at Luo and said angrily. Betty shrugged her shoulders and said lightly, it's okay, he will know later that his thinking is wrong. At this time, Doflamingo, who was embedded in the big tree, let out an arrogant laugh. The newcomers now are getting more and more amazing, they all shocked me. Sure enough, this sea is really boiling, and a new era has finally come, foo 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 foo. With a bang, the tree fell, and Doflamingo quickly swept towards Chris. Little devil, it's been a long time since I met a newcomer like you, it really scared me. If you are allowed to enter the new world, I'm afraid you will be another big name. Doflamingo looked up at Chris, grinned and said, however, you met me today, and you are destined to have no such opportunity. I like to destroy seedlings the most. Seeing that you have such potential, you have to be strangled in the cradle, foo 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 foo. Chris slowly landed on the ground and said calmly, Brother Doflaming, you really can't change your shit, why do you talk so much? In an instant, blue veins appeared on Doflamingo's forehead, obviously furious to the extreme. Little devil, do you really think you are strong? You who know nothing about this sea have no idea what terror is. Feel it well, but don't die easily, foo 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 foo. As soon as his foot slammed on the ground, with a bang, the surroundings cracked, and people quickly flew towards Chris. His right hand clenched his fist, which instantly turned pitch black, and the whole person exuded an aura. Different from just now. Excuse me, Doflamingo. I think I know more about this sea than you do. Chris's right hand was instantly armed, his momentum changed, and he blasted at Doflamingo. The fists hit each other, making a loud explosion. Immediately afterwards, countless dark red lightning flashed from the impact, and a sizzling sound came out at the same time. Boom tilde tilde. A violent aura emanated, the ground all around was cracked, and all the flowers, plants and trees were destroyed. The aftermath has not disappeared, and continues to spread out. Boom, boom, boom. The crew members below suddenly rolled their eyes one by one, and fell backwards. Beppo. Seeing it fainted, Luo quickly turned his head to look at the two fighting, frowned and said, it turned out to be an overlord-colored collision, this guy is really unusual. Poison Q looked at the large group of people who had fallen, and rarely sighed. This is the overlord battle that the captain said, it's really terrible. Vashus clenched his fists and said excitedly, strong, it's really too strong, worthy of being the captain. Lafitte adjusted his top hat, smiled slightly, and said something. I heard the captain talk about the collision of the overlord, and at that time I thought the captain was too exaggerated. Looking at it now, it's really not ordinary, it's really insightful. Betty took a breath, glanced at the fallen people, and said lightly, there are quite a few people with poor mental quality on our ship. Baccarat shook his head gently, said gently and generously. Can't blame them, mainly because these two are really too strong. At this time, Doflamingo said in shock, who are you? A mere rookie with a domineering arrogance, who taught you? Chris was as calm as always, and said a word with no expression on his face. As I said before, beat me and you'll know the answer. Hearing this again, Doflamingo was very angry and said with a grin, it's getting more and more interesting, a potential rookie like you. You should get rid of it earlier, but it won't let you grow, foo 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 foo. As soon as the voice fell, the figures of the two instantly flashed into the air, and they punched each other again, and dark red lightning kept popping up. Shish. Bang bang bang. Both of them moved quickly, their figures were completely unclear, and they kept banging at each other. In less than a few seconds, the two fought each other more than a dozen times, and the dark red lightning never stopped. Seeing the people beside him, all of them smacked their tongues secretly. There is a dazzling sense of sight. Suddenly, there was a change in the field, and the two people stopped and stood opposite each other. Doflamingo looked tired, exhaled heavily, and fine sweat broke out on his forehead. As for Chris, he stood quietly, his breathing did not change in the slightest, and his face was still so calm and calm. This comparison shows the results. Damn brat, he's so strong. Doflamingo was so angry that he was about to explode, and he was exhausted. But there was nothing on the other side, a quiet appearance. This made Doflamingo, who has always cared about face, accept it. The rage is so great that I can't wait to destroy the world. Some readers responded and asked me to describe the battle between the two. However, the author feels that it is unnecessary. After all, Doflamingo is not Chris' opponent, so it is not necessary to write more. Therefore, the next chapter ends the battle, not much to write. 025. Advanced Development of Devil Fruits, Awakening. Doflamingo, we will be partners in the future, that's about it. Chris wrapped his arms in front of him and said calmly, Luo has done a lot to me, I can't let you take him away, there's no doubt about that. Partners. Doflamingo twitched his fingers and grinned, kid, don't be too self-righteous. If you don't kill a potential newcomer like you, I won't worry about it. How many years, it's been a long time since I did my best, you should feel honored, foo. Brother Doflamingo opened his hands, raised his head and laughed, and said extremely arrogantly, little devil, I will show you the true power of devil fruit. Don't be too shocked, kid. Chris was expressionless and gave the answer directly. A mere awakening, are you so excited? Doflamingo's laughter suddenly stopped, as if someone was strangling his neck, and he couldn't make a sound. Shocked. Completely bewildered. You know how to wake up. Brother Doflamingo could no longer remain calm, with a look of incomparable surprise on his face, and murmured, you are a newcomer, how do you know so much? Impossible, there is absolutely a problem. Who the hell are you? You can't be an ordinary pirate. It seems that Doflamingo is distraught. It's not possible to say so many questions. It's not like him. Chris shrugged and said lightly, I don't want to say the same thing a third time. Foo. Doflamingo laughed angrily and said something vicious. Wait a minute, don't die too fast. Shoo. With Doflamingo as the center, white silk threads spread outward in an instant. The ground turned white in an instant, so did the rocks, the trees and flowers. Everything around, without exception, turned white. It looks quite weird. The people on the side were stunned when they saw this scene, unable to react. This is the awakening that the captain said, the ability person can affect the surrounding things, and it really is. Bashar's eyes widened, as if he had discovered something extraordinary. Poison Q showed a mysterious smile, smiled and said, what will the captain do next? I'm really looking forward to it. Lafitte stood his cane in front of him and said something warmly. This island is really worthless. After seeing the top combat power of Chihuahua, I finally know how big the gap is. Luo frowned and said coldly, next, Brother Doflamingo will do his best, bless your captain not to have an accident. Queen Sweetheart looked at Baccarat and said angrily. This guy is really annoying and I don't like him very much. Betty shrugged her shoulders and said lightly, we don't care about these, Chris will naturally teach him how to behave. At this time, Chris wrapped his arms around him, still standing quietly, very calm. He completely ignored Doflamingo's actions and let him change the surrounding environment. Very good, I hope you can stay so calm, don't let me down, kid. Doflamingo grinned and waved his right hand. A huge white line turned from a big tree, like a parade of water snakes, quickly attacked Chris. The air vibrated faintly, and the momentum was ferocious. At a glance, you can see that this wave of attacks is much stronger than the previous ones. Chris looked indifferent, slowly opened his arms, and gave a light drink. Chen Luo Tianzheng. In an instant, a pale white light rose up around Chris, constantly changing combinations. Finally, a white ball of light as tall as a person appeared. And Chris himself, floating in the most central position. Bang tilde. The white giant line just approached, and before it hit the ball of light, it was bounced away and flung wildly in the air. Seeing this scene, Doflamingo was really shocked. Even the attacks after awakening were bounced off. It's so scary. What's your ability? Doflamingo grinned. Looking at this situation, the repulsive forces are gathered together to form a powerful repulsive force field. It's amazing, it seems to be able to deflect all attacks. This is your life-saving means. Little devil, you are really surprising me more and more, foo 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 foo. Chris put his arms around him, still looking calm, and said lightly, you talk too much, brother Doflamming. For the partner's sake, let me remind you. If you fight, you need to be quick, accurate, and ruthless. Rory is rambunctious. In the end, you must be the one who suffers. Doflamingo covered his face and laughed wildly, his voice extremely low. I was preached by a little devil. I was so angry that I laughed to death, foo 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 foo. Little devil, do you really think I can't do anything about you? Go die. Wild waves and white lines. As soon as the voice fell, countless giant lines around, like waves, quickly surrounded Chris. It was densely packed, as if countless white snakes were marching there. It looks really scary. In the next chapter, the battle is over. At the same time, there will be a big beauty in the next chapter. Who do you think it will be? Weekly reveal that it is the very beautiful one, asterisk. 026. The ultimate big move, 16 sacred bullets, God kills. Above is a picture of 16 holy murder bullets, God's killing. Chris floated in the center of the aperture, his eyes were calm, and the giant white lines were allowed to come closer. Just ignore it. Strangulation. Doflamingo folded his hands and shouted angrily. In an instant, all the giant wires spiraled into a twist shape, approaching Chris, wanting to hang him. The momentum is extremely fierce, and there is a sense of sight in the face of a tsunami. Bang bang bang. The explosions came one after another, and all the giant lines, as long as they were close to the light ball, were all bounced off. No matter which direction to attack from, above, left, underground. He just couldn't get close to the ball of light, let alone touch Chris. The defense is really strong enough. Very good, kid, foo 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 foo. Well, this time. Hi Yuan, Bibo. In an instant, the ground all turned into white lines, rolling like waves. This is the ocean that turns the ground into white. But no matter how turbulent the waves are, even if they fall from the sky like a tsunami, they cannot cover the ball of light inside. All were excluded. This time, Doflamingo is really crazy. He vowed not to give up until he broke this ball of light. I don't believe it anymore, you can resist it this time. Death to me, kid. 1,000 arrows pierce the heart, feather strike, line. Shish. The countless silk threads around it quickly changed their shape and turned into the shape of flamingo wings. The tip of each line appeared black, obviously using the armed color domineering. With a bang, he directly surrounded Chris. In the face of Doflamingo's big move, Chris is still the same, with his arms around him, floating quietly, ignoring it at all. Boom boom boom. This time, the explosion was many times stronger than before. The air vibrated, and the aftermath radiated out, causing the surrounding ground to crack continuously and the dust to rise high. The two people were completely covered inside, and the situation inside could not be seen clearly. Seeing such a shocking scene, the people around were really filled with emotion. To be able to push Doflamingo to this level, how strong. Luo's pupils shrank, and he stared at the battlefield with a look of shock on his face. Lafitte turned his cane, looked at him and said with a slight smile, actually, Doflamingo's fate is already doomed. After all, the captain is really too strong. Bassos nodded and laughed. That's right, the captain worked so hard and practiced day and night, it was crazy to the extreme, how could he possibly lose to that guy? Poison Q's old face showed an envious look, coughed and said, but the captain's defense is really invincible. The Queen's sweetheart looked at the direction of the battlefield, her beautiful eyes were full of brilliance, and she sighed with emotion. The captain is amazing, he's a lightning bolt. Betty took a breath and nodded, showing a rare look of admiration, and praised, a man who can change the world is not just talking. Perona danced in the air, her little face full of interest, making a silver bell-like crisp sound. Captain's ball of light, it's really fun, ha 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 ha. At this moment, the sound of fighting in front finally stopped. A gust of wind blew past, and the smoke drifted away, revealing the scene inside. Chris was still inside the ball of light, his face was calm, and he was not hurt in any way. In other words, Doflamingo's big move this time failed again. Foo 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 foo. Doflamingo's blue veins burst out on his forehead, and he said in a low voice, I didn't expect a little devil like you to appear above the sea. Very good, to push me to this point. Brother Doflamingo's eyes turned cold, his arms slammed open, and he said something extremely arrogant. Next, let you see my ultimate move. 16 holy bullets, God's execution. With a bang, 16 huge white lines suddenly appeared behind him, like a big snake swimming fast. In an instant, the bottom of the white line became pitch black, and it continued to spread upward. The end, the 16 giant lines, all turned jet black and gleaming. This is definitely a high-density armed color domineering. Doflamingo, my patience has reached the limit. Chris put his arms around him, his eyes narrowed and said, if you don't stop, I will kill you. Don't think you can scare me by being a Tianlong person. Shock. Doflamingo was shocked. He never thought that Chris knew his identity. This is unbelievable. Foo 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 foo. Doflamingo covered his face and laughed, and said arrogantly, it's funny, it's really funny. The newcomers of this era will really make the sea boil. Swoosh tilde tilde. Doflamingo jumped into the air, and the figure left quickly, leaving his last words. Little devil, when you become Chihuahai, the alliance will officially begin. As soon as the voice fell, the person had disappeared, and quickly moved away. Bosses, I'm sorry, this chapter has already been written. In the next chapter, that beautiful beauty will appear. Sorry, all the bosses, forgive me. 027, the pirate's #1 beauty, Boya, Hancock appears. Seeing Doflamingo leave, the people around couldn't help it. Let out a thunderous roar. What kind of king goes to the 7 Marshalseas, is not just obediently captured, way ha 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 ha. Bossos was so happy that he laughed. Poison Q smiled strangely and said, unfortunately, I didn't see that ultimate move, it's a pity. Lafitte adjusted his top hat and said politely. It seems that Doflamingo also knows that the captain is very powerful. If he dares to continue to attack, he will definitely be killed later. After all, there is still a big gap between his strength and that of the captain. Luo looked up at the sky, and after confirming that Doflamingo had disappeared, he couldn't help showing a complicated look on his icy face. Really Doflamingo is not his opponent. At this moment, Luo Xin's shock really reached a level beyond words. Queen Sweetheart glanced at him and said strangely, how is it, doesn't it mean much? Aren't you disappointed that Doflamingo has run away, do you still think he'll win? Baccarat patted her shoulder and became angry, it's all a team from now on, don't talk like that. Luo doesn't know Chris at all and has some doubts, which is normal. Betty nodded and agreed, but after this time, he is very clear about Chris' strength, and I believe he will not question anything. At this time, a voice came from the front. Let's go. After Chris finished speaking, he walked directly to the outside of the island. The group did not hesitate, and quickly followed. As for Luo, of course it is no exception. He is already a member of the Chris Pirates. Soon, everyone boarded the Chris and set sail. Lafitte, tell Ro about the situation. Chris has never been interested in these things. After explaining it, he walked to the training room. Baccarat looked at them and said with a smile, let's go to the training room and stay there too. Then, these big beauties also left one after another. Babo, come, let's go fishing together. Padong took the fishing rod and jumped and said, fishing is fun, come on, hee tilde tilde. Everyone is an animal, so Beppo didn't feel shy and followed quickly. Padong, I can't fish, you have to teach me. At this time, Luo saw the words on the mast, and as always asked indifferently, what do these ship rules mean? Lafitte stood his cane in front of him and said something politely. First of all, Luo, welcome to the Chris Pirates. I'm the regiment's vice captain, Lafitte. Next, I'll tell you about the ship. Lafitte said with a slight smile. On the ship, strength determines the right to speak, and there are 3 types of battles. The battle for the captain, the battle for the deputy captain, and the battle for the squad leader. The first one doesn't need to be considered, the captain's position is impossible to change, so I won't say more. I'm the vice captain, and if you want to challenge me, I'm always by my side. Lafitte adjusted his top hat, and the gentleman said, as for the battle for the squad leader, that's up to you and Bossos. Bossos looked at Luo and laughed, how about a fight? I really want to determine the order of the squad leaders as soon as possible. Poison Q coughed and said, I too. I like watching the battle the most. 3 battles. Luo carried the demon sword and cried, and said indifferently, the environment of this ship is very suitable for me. Unrestrained, everything speaks with strength. However, I don't have any thoughts of competing for positions for the time being, I'll talk about it in a few days. Bashes shook his head and scolded, I thought there was someone who likes to fight, but I didn't expect it to be this bear. Lafitte looked at Luo and said politely, next, let me tell you about the next voyage, including our goal. Inside the training room. Snapped. Chris stood by the window, lit a cigarette, and silently looked at the blue sky and white clouds outside. Seeing that he was so abnormal, the women looked at each other with puzzled expressions on their faces, and began to talk in a low voice. What's wrong with Chris? Why didn't he practice? The Queen's sweetheart looked at the figure of the man and was very curious. Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth and said lightly, it has something to do with Doflamingo, it should be related to the Chihuahua Alliance. Baccara nodded, stroked her hair, and said something gentle and dignified. The plan can't keep up with the changes, and no one expected that such a big man would suddenly come across. Chris is definitely making new plans, let's leave him alone. Then, in the training room, silence fell. These women are very eye-catching, for fear of affecting Chris's thoughts. After an unknown amount of time, Chris flicked the cigarette butt out of the window and suddenly said something. I'll go out and be back in 2 days. As soon as the voice fell, the person disappeared without a trace. Several beauties were stunned for a moment, wanting to ask something, but they couldn't do it at all. Our captain is really decisive in doing things. He doesn't say a word of nonsense or explain anything. The sweetheart queen shook her head and smiled wryly. Betty took a breath and said lightly, Chris's character has always been like this, just get used to it. Perona flew around in the air, her face wrinkled, so this princess doesn't like to stay with him, it's boring. Listening to their conversation, Baccara smiled and said nothing. Mainu looked at the sky outside the window and thought to herself, looking at this situation, it should be to contact other Chihuahua, there is only this possibility. Not to mention, Baccara really guessed right, Chris is rushing to the windless belt to find the first beauty of the pirates. Boya, Hancock. 028, Hancock, you are disgusting. Calm zone, 9 Snake Island. Dong dong dong. A crisp bell rang on the island. Lord Snake is going to take a bath tilde. Inside the palace, there were shouts. Immediately afterwards, the people in the city, no matter what they are doing, fight, eat, chat. All retreated quickly and were not allowed to stay in the city. Outside the bathing area, a cordon was set up, and many female fighters were standing or sitting, strictly guarding it, and no one was allowed to enter it. With a swipe, the curtains are pulled from both sides. The guards will be handed over to you. Hancock looked ahead, his tone was slightly cold, and he issued an order. Yes, my elder sister. Sandasonia and Marigold responded respectfully. Hancock didn't say much, looked cold and arrogant, walked slowly to the bath with elegant and noble steps. Not knowing how long it took, a voice rang out. "Excuse me, Boya, Hancock. Please give me some time, let's talk about the dragon people." As soon as the voice fell, the figure flashed, and Chris appeared by the bathtub. He put his hands around him, his face was indifferent, and the look in Hancock's eyes was extremely calm. Shock. Incredibly shocked. How can there be a man's voice? Hancock didn't have time to think about it, he squatted down and hid in the pool. He put his hands in front of him, turned around quickly, and looked in the direction from which the voice came. Upon entering, I saw that this was a young man in black clothes and black pants, about 185 centimeters tall and quite handsome. "Who are you?" Hancock's beautiful eyes flashed with cold light, his pretty face showed killing intent, and his tone was extremely cold. This man saw the pattern on his back and must not let him live. Must kill him. "Introduce myself, I'm the captain of the Chris Pirates, Chris." Chris looked at Hancock's white skin and said calmly, "I will become Shichibukai soon. The reason why I came to you is very simple, it is for the next Chiwahai Alliance." Hancock was not listening to Chris at all, she was very puzzled at this time. Why didn't my two sisters come in? If so, how can I stand up? Sandasonia, Marigold. Hancock hugged his body, turned to face the door, and shouted. Tone, full of anger. "Excuse me, Boya Hancock." Chris was as calm as always, and said lightly, "I have rejected all the sounds around me. So, you can't hear what's going on from the outside, that's why. Repel sound. There is such a thing." Hancock was startled again, knowing that if he continued to wait, his two younger sisters would not be able to come in. Anyway, this man has seen it, it doesn't matter. With a swoosh, he quickly stood up, jumped directly to the edge of the bathtub, and put on his clothes. "Damn man, how did you get here?" Hancock's pretty face was frosty, and his tone was full of killing intent. When was he so unbearable? Not only the slave's logo was exposed, but his body was also seen. At this moment, the anger in her heart. It could literally set the world on fire. "It doesn't matter how I got here," Chris said lightly. "Next, let's talk about the Tianlong people. You have been a slave of the Tianlong people, and you must hate them immensely. Then, we can cooperate deeply." Chris looked at Hancock and said earnestly, "My goal is to pull the Tianlong people off the altar and kill them all." Shock. This time Hancock was really shocked to the extreme. "You. They are the creators, how dare you? Dare to do this to them?" When it comes to Tianlong people, Hancock's face is pale, his eyes are extremely frightened, he is really frightened. It seems that the shadows of the past have had a really great impact on her. It's all about changing the color of the tiger. What's not to dare? Chris looked at Hancock and said disdainfully, "Sure enough, when you mention the Tianlong people, you are completely out of combat and almost collapsed. On the surface, it looks very arrogant and cold, disguised in a decent manner. But inside, it's already riddled with holes and fragile. Poor people must have something to hate, and it's people like you who are talking about." In his previous life, when he watched One Piece, he especially hated Hancock's character. Since being hurt by the Tianlong people, Hancock has deeply hidden his heart. In front of people, he is extremely strong and very domineering. The character is simply bad. Therefore, Chris really doesn't have any good feelings for this first beauty of One Piece. Just now, he could throw the clothes directly to Hancock without making her stand up at all. The purpose is to embarrass this woman. 029, Hancock, you are at the bottom of the Shichibukai. You. Hancock pointed at the man in front of him, his face was blue and white, and he was angry. The deepest secret in his heart was revealed like this. How could she feel better? Death to your concubine. Sweet and sweet. Hancock made a heart shape with his hands, and a large pink heart instantly appeared, flying towards Chris quickly. The air vibrated, blowing Hancock's hair, making her look more and more beautiful. Mirror repulsion. Chris didn't dodge, his right hand slowly raised, creating a mirror in front of him. With a bang, the large love was bounced out and fell to the side of the bathtub. In an instant, the color there changed and it was directly petrified. What? Seeing this scene, Hancock's beautiful eyes widened, and his face was full of shock. How is this possible? His invincible sweet wind was bounced off. What's your ability? Hancock frowned and said in disbelief, why is it possible to deflect my attack, and how on earth did you do it? Chris withdrew his right hand and said calmly, I am the one who rejects the fruit ability, and can reject any attack in the world. Your sweet wind, although a little weird, is nothing. Chris looked at Hancock and said lightly, regarding the Chihuahua Alliance, Doflamingo has agreed to join, and then it's up to you. I want Igia, do you have the strength? With a bang, Hancock jumped directly into the air, and swept his right foot against Chris' head. Aromatic feet. A gust of fragrant wind came, the air vibrated faintly, and the force was fierce. Looks like it's still going to be a fight. Chris's right hand was instantly armed, his fingers spread out, and he grabbed Hancock's jade feet. With a bang, Hancock's white legs were grabbed by Chris. Swoosh tilde tilde. A slight voice sounded, and the two immediately disappeared in place, as if they had never appeared before. Less than a second. Before Hancock could react, the scene changed. I saw lush greenery around, towering trees everywhere, and all kinds of strange flowers and plants on the ground. This is clearly a deserted island. Shock. Hancock was really stunned. This island, she knew, was near Nine Snake Island. But he was brought here in an instant. What a terrifying speed. Who the hell are you? Hancock's beautiful eyes looked at the man in front of him, his delicate and perfect face was full of shock, and he said quickly, what kind of ability do you have, and why are you so fast? She suddenly discovered that since this man appeared, she had been shocked many times in a row. I'm the one who changed the world. Chris was as calm as ever, it's a skill I developed, repulsing space. Well, the place is big enough. If you want to fight now, just come. Hancock narrowed his beautiful eyes slightly, looked at the man in front of him seriously, and wanted to see him clearly. The face value is very high, the expression on his face has always been calm, and his body exudes the momentum that belongs to the strong. Where the hell did this monster come from? You are very strong, and the Igia recognizes your strength. As soon as Hancock stepped on the ground, with a bang, people rushed to Chris like lightning. But don't underestimate Igia, you bastard. Aromatic feet. Hancock used the trick again, the only difference. This time, the momentum has completely changed, the thunder is overwhelming, and it is extremely powerful. With a calm expression on his face, Chris finished arming his right hand in an instant, slowly lifted it up, and stood in front of him. Boom tilde tilde. There was an explosion, followed by dark red lightning, flying around the two of them. The aftermath spread out, and the nearby trees, flowers and plants were all destroyed and fell down one after another. What? Shock. Hancock was shocked again. Domineering. This guy even has such courage. How is this possible? You, like I's family, have the qualifications to become kings. Hancock looked at the man in front of him with a complicated look on his pretty face and was very puzzled. Impossible, when did the overlord arrogance become so common? You are definitely not an ordinary person, who are you? Chris pushed out with his right hand, knocking Hancock aside. Looking at her, he said with a serious face, Boya, Hancock, there is one thing you must understand. Although you are the Chihuahua, your strength is at the bottom. Don't think that you are very powerful because you have a tyrannical arrogance. You are completely behind. Having said that, Chris showed a mocking expression on his face, and said disdainfully, I thought I was the Shichibukai, so I would sit back and relax and feel that I was the strongest pirate in the sea. Hiding in the windless belt every day, eating and doing things lazily, not thinking about making progress, and not having the slightest sense of competition. Seriously, if you go on like this, boya, Hancock, you're a real waste. Guys, regarding Hancock's strength, the author believes that she is at the bottom of the Chihuahua. She doesn't work hard to cultivate, no matter how good the qualifications are, there is no way to be strong, asterisk. 030, Hancock is about to enter the new world. He was continuously shocked by Chris, and repeatedly suppressed by him. Hancock was really angry and wanted to beat the man in front of him severely. But she clearly knew that she was not this person's opponent at all. At this time, a flash of light flashed in her mind, and she thought of a way. Chris, do you think mourners are beautiful? Hancock tucked his hair back. Mamu looked at the man in front of him affectionately, with a sweet and pleasant smile on his beautiful and delicate face. The sound is sweet and crisp, like the sound of heaven. I have to say that at this moment, Hancock exudes infinite charm and is very charming. The first beauty of the pirates is indeed well deserved. Unfortunately, she met Chris and was doomed. Boya, Hancock, please put away these little tricks. Chris put his hands in his trouser pockets and said calmly as always, now, let's talk about the next plan. Failed. It failed. Hancock is really going crazy and depressed to the extreme. What kind of monster is this man in front of him? There is no way I can take him. At this time, Hancock was really curious about Chris in his heart. I really want to know more about this mysterious man. Come on, Igia wants to hear what you have to say. If you can't beat it, and you can't use tricks, what else can Hancock do? In desperation, we can only see the situation first. Chris looked at Hancock and said with a serious face, what I said just now is no joke. If you want to participate in the next plan, then practice hard, and don't be slaughtered when you are not strong enough. Mocking myself again. Hancock didn't like hearing those words. She glared at Chris and said coldly, if you deny Igia's strength again, your concubine will never join this alliance. If you don't believe me, you can try it. Chris didn't care about her threats at all, and said lightly. When I become Chihuahua, I will go to the New World and lay down a country as a base. At that time, we will be able to share resources and exchange commodities between our Chihuahua. After all, the country you live in is too poor, and there are not many cultivation resources at all, and it is difficult for the people below to grow. Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted directly by Hancock. She glared at Chris fiercely, with an angry look on her pretty face, and said dissatisfiedly, what nonsense are you talking about? How is Igia's kingdom so poor? Don't put on a self-righteous expression, Igia is not used to it. As a queen, Hancock is very strong and domineering. How can others be allowed to slander their country like this? But she didn't know that Chris was tougher than her. Boya, Hancock, do you know the rules on my ship? Chris said coldly, on my ship, the strong are respected, and those with insufficient strength are not qualified to speak. From the beginning, you have refuted me again and again. I solemnly warn you that if you are weak, you must learn to bow your head. If you continue to disagree with me, don't blame me for killing you. Angry. Hancock was very angry. She really wanted to get out and have a big fight with Chris. But in the end, she didn't dare to do anything. In her opinion, this man's character is simply too strong to the extreme. No one can defy him, not even himself. If you continue to refute him, I am afraid that he is really killed here. Hoo-hoo tilde tilde tilde. A gust of breeze blew and lifted Hancock's black hair slightly. The hair is fluttering, it is truly magnificent. Okay, go ahead and say it, just listen to Igia. Hancock frowned, gritted his silver teeth, and said word by word. She took Chris hard in her heart, if one day she was stronger than him. He must be beaten violently, to get out of today's bad breath. Chris ignored Hancock's resentment and said lightly, as for other plans, I'll tell you later. The most important thing is to improve each other's strength. After speaking, he took out a phone bug and threw it to her. Hancock also realized that his strength was insufficient, frowned his beautiful eyebrows, and said in distress, "Igia also wants to improve his strength, but this is not that simple." Chris glanced at her and sneered, "Staying in the windless belt all the time, there will be no disaster and no disaster. You can only become a ghost if you become stronger. If you want strength, then enter the Great Channel and go to the New World. As long as you can survive there, are you afraid that you will not have the strength?" Chris showed a mocking expression, deliberately provoked her, and said, "However, with your strength, if you enter the New World, I can't guarantee that you will come out alive. If Hancock is willing to work hard, his strength will definitely improve very quickly. Her aptitude is really too strong. Seriously, what a buzz about Hancock entering the New World. Chris is really looking forward to it." 031. Chris, you are a general. Are you looking down on Igia? Hancock was really hit and was stimulated by Chris, and said very proudly, "In a few days, my concubine will go to the Great Waterway, so that you can see how powerful Igia is. Igia will let you know that the Queen of Nine Snake Island is not so vulnerable." Chris shrugged his shoulders and snorted, "Everyone will say big things, and show it off when you do it. Okay, without further ado, I'll take you back." After speaking, "Put your hand in front of Hancock." Hancock frowned and asked suspiciously, "Chris, what are you doing? Give me your hand so I can take you away." Since it is a partner, Chris is also very patient and explained, "If you want to take people through space, you must touch the other party's body, otherwise you will not succeed." "I see, no wonder you grabbed my foot just now." Hancock didn't hesitate and directly raised the jade hand. Anyway, his body has been seen by him, and it is nothing to hold hands. With a bang, the two figures disappeared instantly and disappeared. When it reappeared, it returned to its original place, beside the bath. "For other matters, please contact me on the phone." Chris glanced at Hancock and was about to leave through space. "Hey. I have a question, what kind of strength do you have now?" For this question, Hancock has been in his heart for a long time, and he has to find the answer no matter what. "General." As soon as the voice fell, the figure of Chris disappeared, and he didn't recognize Hancock and continued to question. "What?" Hancock exclaimed. May's eyes widened, and a look of shock appeared on her flawless face. Although she knew that Chris was very strong, she didn't dare to guess that he had the strength of a general. "Admiral, this is the highest combat power of the Navy. Is the strongest person. How could Chris be so young? No, he's not a joking man, he must be telling the truth." Hancock shook his head gently, and even though he was very doubtful in his heart, he chose to believe Chris's words. However, this made her feel very aggrieved. "This guy is so powerful, how can he beat him? How did you get that bad smell out?" "No, I have to get stronger quickly. I'm going to the New World." Hancock's eyes showed a firm look, and he finally made up his mind. Although she promised Chris just now, she was actually swaying in her heart. After all, she has never entered the New World, and she is full of unknowns about that sea area, so she will naturally feel nervous and afraid. But now that she was stimulated by Chris again, all her negative emotions disappeared. There is only one thought. In any case, you must let your name spread throughout the New World. Brush. The curtain was opened. Hancock said coldly and arrogantly as always, "Sandersonia, Marigold, the day after tomorrow Igia will go to the Great Waterway and enter the New World. You guys let me know about this." The two of them were stunned for a while, and some couldn't react. "So good, why are you suddenly going to the New World?" Marigold looked at Hancock and asked in confusion, "Sister, the New World is so dangerous, what are we going to do there?" Sandersonia spit out the snake letter, with a look of fear on her face, and said what was in her heart. "I heard that the New World is very terrifying, and the strong are like clouds. Is it appropriate for us to go there, my elder sister?" Hearing the two of them, Hancock frowned, and she suddenly realized that Chris was right. Staying in the windless belt for a long time, without any danger, not only lost his fighting spirit, but also the two younger sisters. As for the following nationals, let alone. If you go on like this, boya, Hancock, you'll be a real waste. I couldn't help thinking of the man's words in my mind, and I immediately realized that it was so correct. If you continue to stay in the windless belt, the citizens of Nine Snake Island will really be finished. This situation is absolutely not allowed to happen. Not for anything else, but to get stronger. After Hancock finished speaking, he ignored the two of them and walked directly to the palace. Sandersonia and Marigold looked at each other, and neither understood what Hancock meant. What does it mean to become stronger? Can't you get stronger by staying in the windless zone? Although the two were very confused, they didn't dare to say anything, and quickly informed the matter. After all, they know very well what kind of person Hancock is. Incomparably arrogant and domineering, how could they possibly obey their advice? Dong dong dong. The crisp bell rang, accompanied by a woman's voice. Lord Snakey will go to the New World the day after tomorrow. Whoever wants to go, hurry up and sign up. Hearing this shocking news, the citizens were stunned, and they were very puzzled. But no matter how puzzling, their decision was the same. Lord Snake, I will follow you to the New World. And me, I really want to go outside and see the man. I heard that he looks very strange. I will swear to follow you to the death, Lord Snake. Hurry up everyone to pack up, we can't let Lord Snakey wait. No matter where Lord Snake is going, I will always follow, hee tilde tilde. Guys, because Hancock is too important, I put more ink on her. I hope everyone will forgive me. In the next chapter, a very beautiful woman will appear. Guess who it is? Oh, from Beihai tilde tilde. 032, Chris, Igia likes you very much. 9 Snake Island, inside the palace. There are 4 women in total. Shiji, why do you suddenly want to enter the New World? Granny Nu leaned on a snake-shaped cane, and her vicissitudes of life showed a look of doubt. When she heard the bell just now, she once thought she had heard it wrong. How could that cold and domineering snake girl leave the windless belt? Killing her, can't believe it. Yes, elder sister, we are all very curious. Sandersonia and Marigold hurriedly followed suit. Hancock leaned on the throne, with Erlang's legs crossed, his delicate chin supported by his jade hand, and his pretty face showed a look of reminiscence. Not listening to the three of them at all. They looked at each other, really confused. No idea what Hancock was thinking. Suddenly, Hancock held his face, shook his head gently, and murmured, I don't think about him on purpose, but why can't I help it? What's wrong with Igia? Why is this happening? Listening to Hancock's murmurs, the three became more and more confused as to what was going on. Granny Nu tapped the ground with her cane, making a thumping sound, and asked curiously, Snake Girl, what are you talking about? Did something happen? This time, Hancock came to his senses. She glared at the dwarf in front of her fiercely, and said something cold. Gloro Leosa, who asked you to talk to I's family like this? Go out to I's family. Marie Groud looked at Hancock and quickly persuaded, Sister, Granny Nu is here to help us analyze the New World. After all, we don't know anything about it. Sandersonia nodded and said, Sister, let Granny Nu talk to us about the New World. Actually, someone just came to I's house. It's a man. Hancock ignored the words of the two of them and said to himself, his name is Chris. He is very powerful and has the level of a general. He is going to become Chihuahai next, and he will come over to find his concubine to discuss cooperation, which is the Chihuahai Alliance. Hancock held his flushed face and said shyly, he is so handsome and powerful, and Igia likes him very much. Someone come to the door. Talking about the Chihuahai Alliance. Hancock still likes him. It's all about what? The amount of information was too large for the three of them to react, and they were all stunned. In the end, It was Granny knew that she was old and mature, and she recovered the quickest, and hurriedly asked, Shiji, you said that someone was looking for you just now, how is this possible? How did he come to Nine Snake Island, can he do such a thing? Marigold followed suit. Sister, were you not in the bath just now, how did you meet him? Sandasonia nodded, spat out a snake letter, and said a quick sentence. And the two of us have been standing outside, and we haven't heard any sound at all. How could there be anyone? Hancock gradually calmed down, turned into the cold queen again, and said coldly, he ate the fruit of rejection and developed a powerful skill to reject space. Igia was taking a bath when he suddenly appeared. As for why you can't hear the sound, that's because he rejected the sound, so how can you hear it? Hear Hancock say she was taking a shower just now and the man shows up. Just this sentence shocked the three of them. Shiji, did he see the pattern on your back? New mother-in-law's face was full of horror, and she said something in a hurried tone. Yeah, he shouldn't have seen it. Marigold and Sandasonia also quickly asked. Igia was bathing at the time, how could he not see it? Hancock put his black and beautiful hair behind his head, smiled and said, but it doesn't matter if you look at it or not, he has long known that his concubine was once a slave of the Tianlong people. But he didn't care about it at all, and instead asked his concubine to quickly improve his strength and prepare for the future war. Pull the Tianlong people down from the altar, such domineering words can only be said by the man whom I's family likes. Dragon people. Hearing these three words, Marigold and Sandasonia exclaimed in unison. There was a look of fear on his face, obviously remembering some bad memories. As for Granny New, she felt that her head was not enough. From Hancock's mouth, the words, Dragon Man, were uttered. And he said it in such a normal way that he wasn't nervous or scared at all. This is unbelievable. You know, what Hancock fears the most and hates the most is the Tianlong people. Shiji, you said he knew there was a pattern behind you, how is that possible? Granny New's face wrinkled, she said in disbelief, he's still fighting against the Tianlong people, this is just a joke. That's the creator, how dare he have such an idea, it's impossible. Sandasonia and Marigold, both of them were still in fear, and didn't hear what Granny New said at all. Hancock's eyes turned cold, he looked at Granny New, and said viciously, Gloriosa, if you dare to continue to question the man you like in I's family, the concubine will throw you out immediately. He is the best man in the world, Igia will not allow anyone to slander him. Absolutely not. Some readers have said, let me write about Hancock again, saying that I haven't seen enough. In this case, I will describe one more chapter, and the beautiful girl in the Beihai will appear in the next chapter, asterisk. 033, Germa 66. Understood. This time Granny New understood completely. The number one beauty in the world in front of her fell in love with a man. This result shocked her to the extreme. What kind of person Hancock is, Granny New really knows very well and knows very well. She is an iceberg. But now, the iceberg has melted. Hancock was conquered by that man. Shiji, have you fallen in love with him? Granny New had a serious expression on her vicissitudes of life, and said solemnly, the reason why you entered the new world was the advice he gave you, that's right. Hancock nodded lightly and said something very proud. Chris said that my strength is too poor. If I continue to stay in the windless belt, I will be completely useless. Hancock bit his jade finger lightly, with a serious look on his pretty face. He's right, Igia did waste a lot of time before, and never worked hard to cultivate. The citizens of the Nine Snakes are a nation that fights. But now, they are all nesting in the windless belt, not going out to fight against the strong. The fighting consciousness of the whole country has declined to the extreme. If it goes on like this, the country will really perish. Hancock's eyes were firm and he said with great momentum, so, no matter what, you must get out of the windless belt and go to the Great Channel. At this time, Marigold and Sandasonia had gradually returned to normal. Elder sister is right, we all listen to you. The two nodded and quickly agreed. Thump. Granny Nu knocked the crutches on the ground, and she stood on the crutches with her arms outstretched, with a look of relief on her face. Shiji, I didn't expect you to have such a big change. This is really a great thing. In fact, I have already discovered the problem you mentioned, but I haven't told you about it. Granny Nu looked at Hancock, smiled amiably and said, the previous snake girl was too confident in her own strength, and could not listen to advice at all. Now that you are able to know your weaknesses and make changes, it makes me very happy. Hancock stood up, turned his back to Granny Nu, and said coldly. Gloriosa, who do you think you are? Stop preaching to Igia, you traitor who abandoned the country. When Granny Nu heard this, she was instantly furious. She was about to approach Hancock's theory, but was pulled by Marigold and Sandersonia. Shiji, you actually said that I was a traitor, Niunu tilde tilde. I've been protecting you like a mother, don't you know? Marigold and Sandersonia nodded again and said with a smile, yes yes yes. Mr. Nu, don't be angry, my elder sister doesn't mean that. Hancock ignored the words of the three, and put his hand on Samaro's head, showing a sweet and happy smile on his delicate and fair face. Chris, just wait, we will meet in the new world. Igia is looking forward to that day. The West Sea, above a certain sea area. A large ship opened the sea and was heading towards the North Sea quickly. Inside the training room. It's been a day, why hasn't Chris come back? The sweetheart queen leaned on the chair and crossed Erlang's legs, looking a little bored. Baccarat stroked her crimson hair, smiled and said, are you used to watching Chris practice? It feels weird when he's gone. Betty took a breath and said lightly, don't say it, my mother suddenly found out that watching Chris practice is really a pleasure. At this moment, with a bang, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Did anything happen to the ship after I left? Chris looked at them and asked calmly. Queen Sweetheart's beautiful eyes lit up, and she smiled sweetly and said, yeah, Chris, you're back. Don't worry, there are no special circumstances, everything is normal. Seeing Chris coming back, Baccarat couldn't help but smile on her pretty face. With the man in front of him, the ship really has the backbone, and I don't have to worry about it. Chris nodded and didn't say much, just took the bloody red sword and started waving it. 4 days later. Above the deck. Finally entered the North Sea, way ha 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 ha. Bassos looked at the vast sea, in a very good mood, and couldn't help laughing. Lafitte turned his cane and said with a slight smile, after the North Sea voyage is over, there will be the last one left, the East China Sea. After that, we have to enter the Great Waterway, kill crocodile, and become Chihuahua. Poison Q leaned on the chair with a look of anticipation. I really hope to enter the New World early and attack a country. I can poison a lot of people by then, hee hee tilde tilde. Luo cried with the demon sword in his arms, and said coldly, there are so many monsters in the New World, can they survive there? This is a serious question. Suddenly, an alarm sounded from the observation deck. Report. An abnormal situation was found ahead. There are big snails sailing on the sea, and there are big snails. The tone was full of surprise, and it was obvious that the alarm officer was shocked by these big snails. 034, the number 1 beauty in Beihai, Leiju. Inside the training room. Hearing the voices from outside, these beauties were stunned for a moment. Big snail sailing at sea. What the hell is this? Let's go out and have a look. Queen Sweetheart immediately became interested, and her pretty face was full of curiosity. Perona danced in the air, gave a silver bell-like laughter, and said, the big snail that can sail on the sea, this must be very interesting, ha 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 ha. This time, without Baccarat saying anything, Chris took the initiative to stop practicing. Let's go. If he guessed correctly, he must have encountered the Vinsmoke family. Betty took a breath and said lightly, it seems that Chris knows what this so-called big snail is. Baccarat nodded slightly and smiled sweetly, that's for sure, and the other party's background must be not small. A few people chatted and laughed, followed behind Chris, and soon came to the deck outside. The captain is here, it seems that our good luck has arrived again, way ha 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 ha. Bossos looked at the big snail in front of him with an excited look on his face. Poison Q showed an ugly smile and said, "This time it should be a newcomer, I hope to be stronger." Lafitte adjusted his top hat and said gently, "It's the first time I've seen a snail as a sailing tool." Luo nodded and said coldly, "This way of sailing, although the speed is a little slower, it must be very useful in special weather." "Boss, let's change ships." Pa Dong jumped over and said with a smile, "This kind of big snail is very interesting, we will use this kind of sailing in the future, boss." The Queen Sweetheart rolled her eyes at it and said angrily, "You know how to play, hurry up and catch your fish." "It's really a big snail, what a miraculous thing." Perona looked ahead, her beautiful eyes were shining, and her pretty face was full of freshness. "The route remains the same, I will come when I go." As soon as the voice fell, Chris had disappeared on the deck, and no one was there. Bashas shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, "It seems that the captain has another plan, but we are not allowed to participate." Poison Q smiled strangely, "Why don't you drive the boat over and see what kind of people it is?" Poison Q, "If you really do this, you will be the first to be slaughtered when the captain returns." Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, looking very polite. Luo echoed, as always, coldly, and said, "If you get too close to the past, you will definitely anger the captain, and death is inevitable." Perona's face wrinkled, very depressed. "This princess really wants to see the big snail, but this bad guy just won't let me, it's really maddening, tilde tilde. Chris does it, he must have his own ideas, we just move on." Betty took a breath, her pretty face always so calm and calm. Germa War House, inside the lobby. This battle was too easy, and it didn't take much effort at all. If there are such battles in the future, it will be easy for us to make money. Yuji leaned against the sofa, crossed Erlang's legs, and laughed with an excited look on his face. Niji narrowed his eyes slightly, showing a cruel smile. He said with a smile, "Unfortunately, the other party surrendered too quickly, or he really wanted to kill more people." "I'm craving blood, that's a wonderful feeling, haha." IG wrapped his arms in front of him and said coldly, "I didn't kill enough, I must kill more next time." Listening to the words of the three younger brothers and feeling their rebelliousness, Leiju sighed inwardly. She really doesn't like this family, she really wants to escape from here. In her opinion, her relatives are all cold-blooded animals, which makes her feel no warmth at all. So sad for this family. Don't keep thinking about killing people, the mission is the most important thing. Gage looked at the children and said solemnly, "As mercenaries, the most important thing is to complete the tasks of our employers and make enough money. Only by completing each task and accumulating a lot of money can we prepare for the hegemony of the North Sea again." More he talked, the more excited he became. He clenched his right fist tightly and swore, "No matter what, we must let the dead souls of the motherland rest in peace in the North Sea. Germa 66, we must fight for the North Sea again and restore the supreme glory of the past." At this moment, a faint voice sounded. "Excuse me, Vinsmoke, Gage." With a swoosh, Chris suddenly appeared in the hall, wrapped his arms in front of him, and said calmly, "I have made a plan here, as long as we work together. Within 5 years, the kingdom of Germa will surely conquer the North Sea again. I don't know if you are interested. Would you like to hear about this cooperation plan?" Shock. All 5 were taken aback. Someone was able to break in here without a sound. One by one, they hurried to the place where the sound came out, wanting to see who it was. A young man in black clothes and black trousers, very handsome, with a very calm face. The body exudes a strong momentum, and at a glance, it is known that the strength is definitely not weak. "Who are you?" Niji and Yuji, with expressions of surprise, asked in unison. Chris ignored their shock and said calmly, I'm the captain of the Chris Pirates, Chris. You can also think of me as Chiwahai, because after a while, my identity will be this. Guys, I don't need to say who the picture is. For Leju, the author is very fond of her, a very gentle and elegant big sister. Do you like her? Please leave a message in the book review area, *. 035, Reiju is curious about Chris. The 5 members of the Vinsmoke family looked at each other with puzzled looks in their eyes. Chris. None of them had heard the name. Yuji looked at the man in front of him, sneered, and said disdainfully, Are you talking in your sleep? Who is Chiwahai? That's the big pirate recognized by the world government. Just because you want to be Chiwahai. Stop laughing to death. Niji nodded, his expression extremely cold. How dare you be arrogant in front of us? I won't kill you later, I will torture you, he he he. IG was the most decisive, stood up, and was about to attack Chris. Wait a minute tilde. Gage was more experienced, he waved his hand, looked at Chris coldly, and said with a serious smile, Young man, if you said you want to talk about cooperation, then talk about your plan. For him, competing for hegemony in the North Sea is the most important thing. As long as there is a shred of hope, he will not miss it. So, no matter what, he will patiently listen to this young man's thoughts. Hearing what his father said, the 3 of Iji could only choose to give up, not daring to say anything more. Leiju leaned against the sofa, crossed Erlang's legs, and supported her delicate chin with her right hand, looking at Chris with interest. With a woman's intuition, this young man must be very powerful. In Leiju's view, even if all 5 of them went up, they would not be the opponent of this young man. Chris ignored Leiju's gaze and said lightly, It won't be long before I enter the Great Channel, defeat Crocodile, and become Chiwahai. Next, I will go to the New World and attack a non-government allied country as my base. Forgot to tell you, I contacted the other Chiwahai and formed an organization, the Chiwahai Alliance. At present, Doflamingo, the king of Dressrosa, and Poya, Hancock, the queen of Amazon, Lily, are all members of the alliance. Chris looked at the 5 of them and said calmly as always, In the future, the Chiwahai Alliance will share resources and exchange commodities, involving all aspects. Even if you need weapons, we can provide them so that you can improve your combat power and deter Beihai. As for the long-term plan, we will negotiate slowly later, but I promise. In 5 years, the flag of Germa will be planted all over the North Sea. Shock. Very shocking. Hearing Chris' impassioned speech, the hearts of the 5 were shocked. I can't help it, and I choose to believe what Chris said. Also, people with domineering looks have their own aura, and what they say is easy to convince. What's more, with Baccarat's lucky fruit, when Chris does things, the success rate has increased by many times. However, although the 5 were shocked, they quickly calmed down. In 5 years, do you have this strength? Yangji was the most impulsive and reckless. Without thinking about it, he immediately scolded, I will say a lot of nonsense, there is a kind of let's fight and speak with facts. Niji nodded and said with a sneer, I really treat myself as a character, I will definitely kill you later. I'll take the shot first, so don't rob me of any of you. Iji's eyes flashed with coldness, and his tone was extremely cold. Leiju didn't speak, just sat quietly. Meimei watched Chris with curiosity, and her eyes were full of curiosity. Who is this young man? Why is it so loud? Does he really have such power? At this moment, Reiju was attracted by Chris and wanted to know the mysterious man in front of her. Very good, very good. Quote. Gage slapped the sofa and laughed loudly, what you said makes sense, and it gives me hope for the future. But, Gage's eyes turned cold, he looked at Chris, and said viciously, you are a hairy boy, you really have such strength. When you are the Vinsmoke family, can you cooperate casually? Chris shrugged his shoulders and said calmly, looks like it's going to be another fight. In that case, find a spacious place and have a good fight. 3 minutes later. Warehouse, training ground. This is a special training place for soldiers. The ground is solid, and it can be used to check your strength. Gage looked at Chris and took the initiative to explain. In his opinion, if nothing else, this young man is his nobleman. In any case, treat him well and be relatively enthusiastic, not too cold. Not much nonsense. If you want to fight, just start. For this training ground, Chris is not interested at all, he doesn't even look at it, and he doesn't care. Yuji had endured for a long time, and he couldn't bear it any longer. He took the lead and jumped out to fight. However, a figure was faster than him, and that was IG. As the eldest brother, I must come first. As soon as the voice fell, the person had come to Chris, and uttered 4 words in a cold tone. Spark, revolving. On the right hand, a flame instantly appeared, extremely hot, shining with pale gold, and the heat wave was billowing. The temperature of the air rose a little in an instant, and there was still a faint white smoke. Full of momentum and ferocious. As soon as the big brother came up, he beat him hard. It seems that he is very dissatisfied with this guy. Niji put his hands in his trouser pockets, with an excited expression on his face, eager to see the scene of Chris being abused. Yuji snorted and said disdainfully, "This guy named Chris is so arrogant. If the big brother doesn't go first, I will torture him and let him die in pain, ha ha ha." For these 3 people, the author doesn't like them very much. Their personalities are too bad. So in the next chapter, I will definitely beat them up and teach them how to behave. How do you feel about them? Do you hate them too? 036. The 3 were kicked away by Chris. Fist. In the face of IG's onslaught, Chris did not evade, and the 5 fingers of his right hand spread out, instantly gathering a large amount of white light. With a grip, it slammed out. Bang! A blast came. Ah tilde tilde. IG screamed, and people flew back. He stepped on the ground continuously, trying to stabilize his body, but the large white fist kept repelling him. Can't stop at all. Dong dong dong. The people continued to fly backwards, and soon came to Jaji and the others. Shock. Incredibly shocked. Seeing IG's appearance, the 4 of them had expressions of horror on their faces. What's going on? Why can't Big Brother stop? Niji looked at IG's back with an unbelievable expression on his face. Yuji said quickly, "Don't worry about it, stop the Big Brother first." As soon as the voice fell, he immediately jumped behind IG and pushed with both hands, trying to stop him. However, Yuji clearly thought too much. Chris's blow contained a lot of repulsive force, how could it be so easy to resist? When IG's back touched his hands, less than 0.01 seconds later, Yuji was directly knocked back. This is the man's arm as a car, beyond its own power. Damn it, why so much force? Yangji was so angry that he cursed, unable to stabilize his body at all, and was taken by his elder brother and flew backwards. Niji didn't have time to be shocked, and quickly jumped behind Yuji, raised his right leg, and swept forward fiercely. With a bang, Niji kicked Yuji in the back. Finally, the figures of the 2 people in front were stabilized. Second brother, can't you think of another way? As for kicking. Yuji looked at Niji, a little speechless. Niji waved his hand, looked at Chris' figure, frowned and said, "Don't talk about it, we have to plan it out. This guy is really strong. One-on-one, we're not even his opponent." Yuji nodded and agreed. "The 3 of you are going together, just take turns to abuse him." Gage looked at Chris and asked curiously, "Chris, what kind of ability do you have?" Reiju didn't speak. Maimu stared at Chris, she was extremely curious. It's really terrifying to have such strength with a simple punch. His intuition was indeed correct, he was really strong. I ate the repulsion fruit, which is a skill I developed, repulsion fist. Chris seemed to be patient and explained in detail, bringing the repulsive forces together to form a fist and then swinging it out has this effect. Reject the fruit. Leju frowned her beautiful eyebrows, and she was very puzzled. She had seen the devil fruit's illustration and knew that it was a superhuman devil fruit, but the illustration showed that this fruit was not very strong. But why did it change when he came to him? Really confused. Don't care what devil fruit it is, you will surely die today anyway. Niji looked at the two of them and said viciously, let's use the strongest move to kill him directly. I'm very annoying to see this person, let's just kill him. Yuji nodded and agreed, it's okay to torture him, it's better to end the battle early. Yuji's eyes turned cold and he said directly, then let's go. Shish. The three quickly rushed towards Chris, and light appeared in everyone's hands. IG is red, Niji is blue, and Yuji is light white. Father, leave them alone. Leju looked at this ruthless father and said with a smile. Gage looked serious and said coldly, if you can't even resist the attack of the three of them, then this Chris is not qualified to cooperate with us at all, let him die. This is what happened to him toying with us. Leju nodded and said with a smile, father is right, just to test his strength. Mainu looked in Chris's direction and secretly prayed, hoping that this man would be safe. After all, she is not like these people, she is gentle and generous, and doesn't want to see Chris get hurt. Mixed color burst. The three of them shouted in unison, the light in their hands bloomed, the thunder was overwhelming, and the momentum was unusually fierce. The entire training ground is illuminated very brightly. Chris didn't care about the attack of the three at all, and slowly raised his right hand. Mirror repulsion. Boom boom boom. The boxing of the three, without touching the mirror, was directly repelled. What? The three flew backwards in three directions, their faces filled with horror. They never thought that such a powerful combined attack skill would be bounced off. At this moment, with a bang, Chris disappeared and appeared behind IG in an instant. His right leg was armed and kicked out quickly. With a bang, IG was kicked out and screamed. Immediately after, Niji and Yuji, the same is true. Before the two could react, they were both kicked away by Chris. The screams come and go. 037, Leju, you are in charge of the cooperation between the two sides. Do you want to continue? Chris put his hands in his trouser pockets and said calmly, if it's not enough, keep playing. However, this time I will hit harder. If I kill you, I can only blame you for being too weak. Gage clapped his hands with a smile on his face, and said happily, okay, very good. Your strength is really strong, I believe what you said, you will definitely become Chiwahai in the future. Then from now on, we will officially cooperate. Leju stood quietly, slender, and her beautiful eyes looked at Chris, her eyes gleaming with brilliance. This man did not disappoint himself. Really very powerful. The three of Iji were all arrogant and arrogant. They didn't admit defeat at all, and wanted to continue fighting. But when they heard Jaji's words, they could only keep silent and dare not say anything more. For their father's decision, they never dared to disobey, they could only obey. For other matters, please contact me on the phone. Chris took out a phone bug, threw it to Gage, and was about to leave. The copyright of the novel resource belongs to the original author. The text is only for personal study and trial reading. Please delete it within 24 hours after downloading. Please support subscribing to Genuine Novels and refuse piracy. This novel was first published by Dragon. Feilu's novel internal group 1,142,529,731. More wonderful Feilu novels are in the hands of the group owner. Welcome to the group. Wait a minute. At this time, Gage made a sound, looked at Chris and said seriously, although we started to cooperate, in order to make sure nothing goes wrong, I need to send someone to supervise. Otherwise, we don't know the situation on your side at all, this is absolute. Send someone to supervise. Hearing their father's words, Leju and IG were all stunned for a moment. This elected person must be one of them. It doesn't matter. Chris shrugged his shoulders and said lightly, "Bring someone here, I'm ready to go." Chris was not surprised that Gage would say such a thing. On the surface, this man is ruthless, but he is actually very cowardly at heart. When in danger, they even cry and ask for help. Such a person, who is naturally suspicious, how could he completely trust Chris? "Reiju, from now on, you will follow Chris and be in charge of the cooperation between the two sides." Jaji looked at his daughter, did not discuss with her at all, and said firmly, "If you find anything, remember to report it in time, don't delay." Stunned. Not only Reiju, but even Chris. He never thought that the person who boarded his boat would be this gentle and generous woman. In fact, Chris has a really good impression of Reiju. This woman is alluring, tall, and elegant and dignified. Typical good wife and good mother. Reiju wanted to say something, but seeing Jage's grim expression, she gave up immediately. How can she not know how cold-blooded her father is? No matter how many words I say, I beg hard. It is also impossible to change his decision. In this case, Reiju nodded, stroked her pink hair, and showed a shallow smile on her delicate and beautiful face. "Father, don't worry, I will definitely complete the task." The sound is crisp and pleasant, like the sound of heaven. It's just that this smile, with a slightly bitter look, is not from the heart. Hearing Gage's words, the three of IG breathed a sigh of relief. If they were sent to guardianship, it would really torture them to death. They don't want to do this kind of errand. "Give me your hand." Chris put his big hand in front of Reiju, his expression still so calm. "Hey, what are you trying to do, in front of us, flirt directly?" Yuji was suddenly unhappy, staring at Chris, looking very dissatisfied. Niji laughed, "Or, let's continue to fight him." Reiju didn't doubt Chris, the woman told her directly. The young man in front of him was not like that at all. Maemu looked at Chris, showing a gentle and pleasant smile on her delicate and beautiful face, and asked curiously, "Chris, can I ask, why do you want to do this?" For Reiju, Chris was very fond of him, and with a rare smile, he said lightly, "Give me your hand and you'll know what's going on." "Oh tilde. Reiju nodded her head, embarrassed to continue asking more, and put her small hand as white as jade in front of Chris. "Go away." As soon as the voice fell, with a bang, the two disappeared in an instant, without a trace at all. Shock. All four were shocked by this scene. It must be incredible. What's going on here? Why did it suddenly disappear? Nish looked around, trying to find the two of them. But in the end, nothing was found. Too fast, really fast. Yuji's eyes widened, and he looked like he was in a hell, and muttered, "This guy has been hiding his strength just now, and he didn't use his full strength." IG frowned and said coldly, "Just now, that's how he appeared in the hall, no wonder we didn't find out." On the other hand, Jaji, after reacting, couldn't help laughing like a madman. "Well, that's really nice. The stronger Chris is, the better our chances are." Gage clenched his fists tightly and said excitedly, "One day, our kingdom of Germa will definitely fight for the North Sea again. The undead of the motherland, you can finally return to your homeland, ha ha ha." Big guys, this is the end of the Vinsmoke family here. In the next chapter, a supernova will appear. Guess who it will be? By the way, this is the North Sea, asterisk. 038. Reiju's admiration for Chris is extreme. North Sea, over a certain sea area. Under the blue sky and white clouds, above the blue waves in the sea, two figures are moving fast. "Chris, can I ask, what is your ability?" Reiju looked at the receding sea level with surprise in her beautiful eyes. The man in front of him was really shocked. She had never heard of such a terrifying speed before. At this moment, Chris was extremely mysterious in Reiju's eyes. "It's the ability I developed to exclude space." Chris looked ahead and said calmly, "If you want to take someone through the air, you must touch the other person's body." If it was someone else, Chris might not have explained it. But the other party is Reiju, so he is very patient. Oh, I said, so it is. Reiju silently looked at Chris back, her beautiful eyes filled with admiration, her impression of this man. Really very good. The strength is extremely powerful, the person is handsome, the character is calm and restrained, and he is full of charm. You can't find a better young man than him. At least Reiju thought so. Putting aside the distracting thoughts in her heart, Reiju's beautiful and refined face showed a gentle and dignified smile, and her voice was pleasant to the ear. Chris, may I ask how fast you can go if you go all out? For Reiju, Chris knew very well that she was a lady and very polite. Therefore, I didn't bother to persuade her, and said calmly, I have never traveled with all my strength, so I can't answer you this question. However, it is not difficult at all to travel around the world in one day. Hearing this answer, Reiju felt that her head was not enough. Meimu stared blankly at Chris's back, and a complicated look appeared on Qingguo Qingcheng's face. What kind of monster is this young man? Why is he so powerful? Why is it so good? At this time, Reiju's admiration for Chris really reached an indescribable level. It must be fun to follow such a man and stay by his side. She is looking forward to the next voyage. In any case, be sure to get to know this mysterious man well. Chris, above deck. Little Padong, change lousy out. Basas said with interest and excitement. Duque looked at Padong, with an ugly smile on his vicissitudes face, coughed and said, this ability is really weird, ahem. Lafitte turned his cane and said gently, it's a pity that Padong is too weak to give this fruit too strong attacking power. Luo, as always, said coldly, even so, this phantom beast devil fruit is very powerful. Okay, wait a moment Tilda. Padong took out the deformed leaf, held the golden pen in his paws, and quickly wrote the words, bosses. Come on, he. Padong threw the deformed leaf out, and with a bang, a burst of white smoke appeared. In an instant, a figure appeared, exactly like Basas. Anyone going to fight? Way ha 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 ha. Basas raised his arms high and looked at the people opposite him, looking extremely arrogant. Basas looked at this person who was exactly like himself and couldn't help but said with emotion, every time I see it, it feels incredible. Illusory beast devil fruit, it's really too strong, it can even transform people. Lafitte adjusted his top hat and looked very polite. The most critical issue is that the person who has been changed can use his own abilities. This is the most terrifying existence. Luo nodded and said in agreement, if Padong can change the captain out, then who will be its opponent? Sweetheart Queen smiled, but this situation cannot happen. Chris is too strong, it's not that Padong can change it, unless the little guy continues to improve its spiritual power. Betty spit out the smoke in her mouth, still so indifferent and calm. It turned out that Padong used the deformed leaf, although he could change the opponent. However, this requires mental energy. The more powerful the person who is transformed, the more mental power Padong consumes. Before, it tried to transform Chris, and as soon as the deformable leaf was thrown out, white smoke rose. Chris just couldn't appear, and the smoke dissipated instantly. Interesting, so interesting, really fun, Haley ha ha ha. Perona flew around in the air, giving out a silver bell-like laughter, very happy. I'm not playing anymore, I'm going to go fishing, hee tilde. As soon as Padong's voice fell, there was a bang, smoke appeared, and, bosses, disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Just then, whoosh. Two figures suddenly appeared on the deck. Reiju, you and them get to know each other. After Chris finished speaking, he walked directly to the training room. Although he had a good impression of Reiju, it was impossible for him to delay his cultivation because of her. For Chris, strength is king, and everything else is secondary. 039. Dawn Peacock, Day Tiger, Evening Elephant, Yi Kai. A woman came. Is this the new crew? It's a woman again, so boring. Basas has never been interested in women, so he shook his head and walked directly to the side. Poison Q looked at Leju with a weird smile. The captain likes women very much, that's understandable. Luo Sao glanced at Poison Q and said coldly, everyone knows what kind of person the captain is. Besides cultivation, there are other things in his eyes. Rafat nodded and agreed, I think so too. After that, he turned his cane, looked at Reiju, and said politely, hello, welcome to the Chris Pirates. I'm the vice captain of the group, Lafitte. Next, take a few minutes of your time and let me introduce you to the situation on the ship. Baccarat waved his hand, raised his eyebrows, smiled and said, Lafitte, we are all women, we will handle this matter ourselves. The sweet queen nodded and echoed, yes, you are busy with yours, we will do it ourselves. Perona flew around Leju with a curious look on her face. Your eyebrows are so strange that they are curled up. This is the first time this princess has seen them, ha 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 ha. Feeling everyone's enthusiasm, Leju smiled warmly and said generously, you guys misunderstood, I'm not a new crew member. I'm a member of the Vinsmoke family and I'm here to work on the partnership. I hope that in the days to come, everyone can take care of you, thank you. Not a new member. Everyone was stunned for a moment, a little unable to react. Since the captain asked you to board the ship, we don't have much to say. In short, you are very welcome to come. Lafitte smiled at Leju, and after speaking, he walked to the side. Luo and the others didn't ask any more questions and walked away. After all, there must be a reason for Chris to do this. They don't want to ask more questions, and it's better to keep silent. Leju, let's chat in the training room. Baccarat looked at her with beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, when we are free, we will stay in the training room, watch Chris practice, and pass the time. Betty took a breath and said lightly, let's talk in the past, my mother is very curious about this cooperation. Go to see Chris practice. Hearing this, Leju's eyes lit up, and she was instantly interested. She smiled sweetly and said, okay, let's go over together, just to get to know Chris. His strength is very strong, and it gives me the feeling that it is very mysterious, just to see how he cultivates. Sweetheart Queen walked on and explained with a smile, he's the hardest man on the ship. Every day, apart from cultivating, it is still cultivating, and I am not interested in other things at all. Just a cultivator madman. Baccarat looked at Leju, smiled and said, because of the rules of this ship, the strong are respected, and everything is based on strength. If Chris doesn't work harder, the captain's position will be replaced one day. At this time, a group of people had already arrived at the door of the training room and walked in one after another. When he entered his eyes, he saw a figure in front of him, waving a blood-red sword there. Leju looked at the training room and found that many of the equipment was well equipped. Barbells, sandbags, boulders. Chris is practicing swordsmanship and he has an assignment every day. Queen Sweetheart sat down, looked at Leju, and explained with a slight smile, that is to swing the sword 10,000 times. This is the goal he set for himself. Betty leaned against the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and looked indifferent and calm. It can be seen from this that Chris's swordsmanship is definitely very powerful. It's just that he never showed it and kept hiding his strength. Perona danced in the air and hurriedly said, not only does he hide his sword skills, but Chris's body skills are also super strong. Didn't you say last time, Chris has developed some very powerful skills? The peacock, the tiger in the day, the elephant in the evening, what else is going on? Perona frowned and said distressedly, I can't remember, I remember there is another one. Baccarat stroked her crimson hair and said with a smile, it's Yi Kai. Chris said that this physique is named after the time of day. Dawn, day, evening, night, it's just a whole day. Perona's beautiful eyes lit up and she nodded again and again. That's right, that's it, Haley tilde tilde. Hearing their conversation, Reiju became more and more surprised and looked at Chris. It is simply admiration to the extreme. Knowing swordsmanship, physique, and devil fruit ability. Reiju looked at them, her beautiful eyes were shining, and she said with incomparable admiration, "I've never heard of such a complete combat power. If you don't say it, I really can't believe that there are such powerful men in this world." The sweetheart queen nodded and sighed, "So, he is destined to change the world, this is inevitable." Betty threw away the cigarette butts and said lightly, "If you don't have enough strength, how can you get a foothold in the new world? It's not surprising when you think about it." Baccarat looked at Reiju and smiled gently, "Anyway, if you stay on this ship, you will gradually get to know Chris and what kind of person he is. By the way, I want to ask." Reiju suddenly remembered a question, looked at them and asked curiously, "What kind of strength does Chris have now?" Did he say this? She had been wanting to ask this question before, but she was too embarrassed to ask Chris. Now that these people are so talkative, it's time to ask. I know. Perona flew in front of Reiju and said with a smile, "Chris said that his current strength is at the level of a general tilde. Guys, this chapter gives some explanations to Chris. The situation of Chris is not written before, so I will mention it here so that you can have an understanding of Chris' comprehensive strength, *. 040, Lord Snake, please take me with you." What? Reiju's eyes widened in an instant, and a look of shock appeared on Chinguo Chingchung's face. "Admiral, this is the highest combat power of the Navy. It is an invincible existence. Chris has come this far, how is this possible?" Yes, Reiju admitted that Chris was strong, very strong. But I never thought that he would be so strong. Chris is indeed the strength. Betty glanced at Reiju and said lightly, "Don't look at him young, but he is working too hard, working so hard every day and every night. So, it's not unacceptable to have such strength." Queen Sweetheart looked in Chris's direction with a smile on her pretty face. "By the way, he seems to have grown a little taller. It used to be 183 centimeters, but now it's 185 centimeters. It is estimated that when it enters the Great Channel, it will continue to grow taller." Baccarat pulled up her hair and said elegantly and noble, "He is only 19 years old. When he is growing his body, isn't it normal for him to grow taller?" Reiju didn't speak again. Maimyu looked at the man in front of her with admiration in her eyes. So young and so powerful. Reiju is really curious about Chris' future and wants to see where he will go. Chihuahua is definitely not the end. ellipsis. The windless zone, the port of Nine Snake Island. The sky is blue as wash, white clouds are blooming, and the sun is shining brightly. What a day to go out. Who put the cat on the road that Igia must pass? Hancock kicked out quickly with his right foot, kicking a white cat aside. A fat woman next to her hurriedly hugged the white cat, knelt down and apologized and said, "I'm sorry, Lord Snake, I will definitely pay attention in the future." Hancock ignored it, looked cold and arrogant, and walked towards the port with noble and elegant steps. "Lord Snake, please let me go to sea with you. Her Majesty, take me with you, woohoo. Your Majesty Snake, the sea is where women should go, please take me with you, I beg you. I can still fight, I still want to serve the country, please don't abandon me, Lord Snake." "No, I really want to go to sea. Marigold looked at Hancock and said respectfully, "Sister, everything is ready." Sandersonia nodded and said, "Food, weapons, things that should have been brought with them have not been left behind. Snake Princess, the Great Waterway is no better than the Windless Belt, it is full of dangers, you must be more careful." New mother-in-law leaned on crutches, looked concerned, and said seriously, "Especially in the New World, where people basically use domineering. If you encounter a strong opponent, you must pay more attention. If it really doesn't work, then..." Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted directly by Hancock. "Shut up." Hancock glanced coldly at Granny New, pointed at her and reprimanded her. Glorious, you want Aegea to escape without a fight. My concubine is Chiwahai and the queen of Nine Snake Island. How could she possibly lose to anyone? You traitor who abandoned the country, still look at Nine Snake Island honestly, and stop saying such stupid words. After speaking, he pushed his hair back to his head and strode toward the boat. Granny Nu was instantly mad, and said quickly, Shiji, you can't be so arrogant all the time. When you encounter an unmatched opponent, you must avoid it. Mr. Nu, don't worry, we will pay attention. Marigold and Sandasonia said a word in unison and quickly followed. Granny Nu shook her head gently, with a helpless look on her vicissitudes face. She said to herself, it seems that Snake Princess still needs to suffer a little. But this is fine. When you enter the new world, you will know your own shortcomings, and it is also a good thing to be frustrated. Soon, the big ship set off, slowly left the port, and headed for the deep sea. Inside the lounge. What should I do? I really want to call Chris. Hancock sat on top of Samaro, holding his cheek in his jade hand, very shy, and said to himself, this can't be done, Chris must be very busy now, and his concubine can't disturb him. Marigold and Sandasonia looked at each other with helpless expressions. These 2 days, Hancock will have such a situation. Whether sitting or standing, he will be there talking to himself. Every time I mentioned the word, Chris. At first, the two of them didn't know what was going on. Later, after Granny knew, they realized that Hancock fell in love with Chris. But Nine Snake Island is all women, and the two of them can't understand what love is. So I really feel incomprehensible about Hancock's appearance. Sister, if you want to call him, just call him directly. He will definitely not be angry. Marie Groud looked at Hancock and said with a smile, after all, sister, you are the most beautiful woman in the world, and he will definitely forgive you. Sandasonia nodded and agreed, yes, my sister, you miss him here, Chris doesn't know either. It's better to call him directly and tell him that we are going to the Great Channel. Isn't that good? In fact, the main reason is that the two of them really want to see what this Chris looks like. She was able to make her sister become so reluctant to leave her home and not thinking about tea and rice.